Welcome everyone to Satori. This observation is known by different names in different parts of the world. Sometimes in Southern Asia they call it Vesak. In Northern Asia they call it Happy Bodhi Day, and some people will say Happy Enlightenment Day. And different regions of the world will celebrate it at different times. In Southern Asia they do it in the summer, but they combine a whole bunch. They do the birth of Buddha, the enlightenment and the death of Buddha all in one ceremony. But we tend to follow the northern Asian tradition as far as the calendar. And in Japan, it is usually celebrated anywhere between the 8th and the 16th. So we always try to do it as close as we can to one of those dates. And the only reason it's that period of time is because Japan is a temperate climate, so they have winter and a lot of winter types of celebrations. And so the one emperor who was very much wanting to be more Western adopted the Julian calendar, and so that's why we have it now. But I do think it's most fitting to have it now, because humans have always had some sort of celebration that precipitated the coming winter and the coming of light. So I think it's most appropriate. So tonight's talk, I promise, won't be as long as Sagaki, if you went a bit long. You said,
I said, aw.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, thank you. Well, I can stretch it a little bit. I'm never lacking for that. But I will try to be mindful this time. So I'm going to start with 3 readings, and then I will read some things to you that I've written because I think they're important. But the name of the talk is How Do We Live Out of Enlightenment? What does it mean to live out of enlightenment? So let me begin by the readings. So this first reading is by Mumon Ekai. A thunderclap under the clear blue sky. All beings on earth open their eyes. Everything under the heavens bow together. The holy mountain leaps up and dances. This next one is from a late friend of mine. If there's any fans of this music, they'll know who he is. Ronnie James Dio. Did we have someone that was a big fan? There you are. I try to bring Ronnie in a lot. Come down with fire. Lift my spirit higher. Someone screaming my name. Come, make me holy again. I'm the man on the silver mountain. And finally, still dawn. Silent night, holy night, all is clear, all is bright. So the word, we call it Satori because Satori in Japanese means enlightenment. And in the Japanese tradition, there are 2 words that are used to talk about when someone has an experience of oneness. Ones that are introductory, or having glimpses of it, or tastes of it, are often called kensho. And you can have those every day, if you're fortunate. If you practice, usually you can get one every day. And a kensho is sort of seeing into the nature of things as they are. But Satori is generally not used in that sense. If it is used, it's used in a very big sense, like the observation of Shakyamuni. And so the meaning of the word Satori comes from the verb in Japanese, satoru, and it means to know intimately. So I like that. I think that's very different from what a lot of people assume that word means. So Satori, or enlightenment, means to know intimately. And of course, that is not unusual to us, right? In the Hebrew, to know someone, right? In the Hebrew scriptures was to what? Well, it meant to know them intimately. Sometimes it was a euphemism for sexuality, and sometimes it was just a deep, loving connection. So the word Satori means that. So remember that as we go a little further. And in Greek, the word is gnosis. And one of the things that my seminarian students learn is that Buddhism started certainly in northern India, but it flourished most, not there, but in the Greek world, particularly in Gandhara, and then it spread out to what we now call the Middle East, or the Levant. And so that's very strange for people to think about. But actually Buddhism flourished there for well over 1,000 years. And so a lot of the Greek philosophers, like Plato, Pyrrho, Ptolemy, Plotinus, they were heavily influenced by Buddhism. And most of them talked about that from having visits to India, when they really didn't have to go that far, because the trade routes, everybody, you didn't have to go that far to get this information. But there was a lot of mixing in that time. So I think of someone who experiences Satori is someone who is like a Gnosticos, someone who knows intimately the oneness of light. And the practice that we're called upon is to become, in the Greek, monachos. And monachos is the term from which we get the word monk in English. So what is a monachos? Well, a monachos is a Gnosticos. So it's someone who has experienced awakening, experienced Satori, and then is living out of that. Now, there's an interesting insight here from the use of that term. And so monachos is the idea, it can be translated as one. It certainly can be translated as one who practices oneness. But it also means something specific. And Shakyamuni talks about this a lot in some of the sutras, where he says that we should become an island unto ourselves. And that strikes people odd, really, right? Because we're talking about oneness. But when it comes to practice, his suggestion is that we become like a rhinoceros. We become like a cat, where we practice and find that refuge within ourselves, and that we stop seeking it outside of us, and that we cultivate it from that perspective, and not depend on the world or anyone else for our well-being or our practice. So it's a very strong sense, you might say, of individualism in some sense, right? Maybe like Emerson would talk about that. But he really did. He talked about it a lot. Even at his death, which we celebrate as the Nirvana Day in February, they all said to him, well, who's going to take over now? Who's the next in line? Who should be the leader? And he said, figure it out for yourselves. Take refuge in your own true self. So I think that the idea here, to start with, in terms of living out of enlightenment, is first of all that it means to have this intimate sense of experience with oneness, the oneness of life, which can come through anything and everything. But it also is emphasizing, this is you. You have to do this. Like the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas are there to teach you and to aid you even. But this is your path. No one else can do this for you. And so it's asking you to deeply and sincerely take that to heart. That I can't rely on my friend. I can't rely on my loved one. Heck, I can't even rely on my Sangha or my teacher. It's me. I have to find the Buddha within, and I have to cultivate it. All right, so the next I'm going to tell you the story of the queen fish. Anybody ever hear that story before? Unless you know Indian culture, you probably won't. But it's a fun story. So one day, apparently, there was this fish, we'll call him Tony. And this fish was very curious. He'd heard that there was this thing called the ocean. And he was so curious as to what that was. It sounded so glorious and so big and so wonderful. And so finally, he was able to get an interview with the queen of all the fish. And when he got to her, he said, "Hey, please, tell me, what is this ocean that all the great sages talk about? What is it?" And the queen fish said, "It's all around you. It's in you. There is nowhere to go to escape it, and really nowhere to find it. It's right here." So that emphasis is what? Pretty straightforward, right? It's everywhere. It's not like it's some place we have to go off and find. People often think that's the case. They think they have to go up to the top of a mountain somewhere, right? And that'll do it for them. Whether it's in someone. I remember I was having a conversation one time with a woman who is a practitioner in a Hindu tradition, and we were getting along swimmingly. But then she started talking about her teacher, and started talking more and more about this guy like he was a god, or that he was somehow, divine in a way that she wasn't. And I said that might be the big difference between us. Now, it's not that I had any fault with her seeing the divine in that teacher, but it was more important to me that when she looked in the mirror, she saw the same reflection. And so that's the other thing that this experience of this practice is calling us. So living out of oneness is what? It means to open oneself to the intimacy of the oneness of all life and realize that that possibility is in every moment and in every place. It's not in some strange land. And even though teachers can be very helpful, and they can help us because they have experience, that's it. That's as far as it goes. Even the word sensei in Japanese means nothing more than someone who's hiked that route before. That's all it means. So here's one of the sayings that I'm going to read. And this saying actually is an official statement that comes from some of the Japanese Buddhist traditions. So as you can see, oneness, doji, that's what the Japanese word for it is, basically exists from the beginning. For this reason, it is not a matter of trying to become one, but it is the nature of all sentient beings in the earth that from the very beginning cannot be separated from doji. Enlightenment is thus not an achievement, and this is a really important word, but a process of dropping away and realizing that everything is doji. It is very clear that the chief aim of the Buddha way is to provoke the awakening that we have always been one with Buddha, one with heaven, and one with earth. I put that together from two main statements, one from the main Japanese Zen, and one from the Shin. So they're perfectly harmonious. So when we're practicing, what does this mean? And so the metaphor that I came up with, and I was talking with one of my clergy about this earlier. Are any of you Star Trek fans? All right. So there was a Star Trek series called Deep Space Nine. Did you like that one?
Yeah. We just finished it, and we're just starting with Janeway.
Yeah, which is very good too. So one of the actors in that show is a woman by the name of Nana Visitor. Have you ever heard of her?
Didn't she write the beginning to one of your books or something?
She did. She's a student of mine. So one of the things that we were exploring together was this idea of this unique world of being an actor. And so what is an actor? An actor is someone who takes the script that they're given, and then they, on a stage or in front of a camera, they play that role. And one of the things that she and I were working on is that, she said one of the reasons that actors' lives are so chaotic is because they feel like if they create chaos in their personal life, that can focus them to dive in and give themselves to the role. It's very strange, right? And yet, I thought that that was such a nice comparison for our life. We live like actors, and we're playing out of a script. Now, often the script isn't one we've written. The script is something that somebody else wrote for us, but we're playing it out. And boy, we start playing that out early, and we can play it out till the end of our days. And it becomes all about the drama and the chaos. And it's almost like, to some degree, we're addicted to that. But I think it's a nice metaphor for this practice of living out of oneness. It's like an actor who knows they're an actor. And I think that delusion, or not living out of enlightenment, is playing that role on that stage that Shakespeare spoke of. But we've forgotten. We've forgotten that we're just playing a role. And so we lose ourselves in that role. And we forget it, right? And you've heard of famous actors, right, who are, what do they call them? I forget the school. Method, right? They lose themselves. And when they're off, when they're not filming or what they're doing, they stay in character. Right? And so it's like that. But it's like we've forgotten that we are. And the only difference between that and someone who is living out of enlightenment is they've realized what's going on. They know what it is. They know it's this play. They know that there's a script that's been written for them, and they also know this, that they don't have to play that script. But the whole time, there's like one eye out at the audience, that they know that this isn't real. Not in the sense that we tend to believe it, so that we believe it so much that it's all there is, and then we lose sight of everything else. Is this making sense? Mm-hmm. So I think of it like that. I think part of enlightenment is to realize that oneness is always here. I don't have to go anywhere to get it. It's in the smallest things, not necessarily the grandest things. And I am to cultivate that myself and not worry about anybody else. In other words, I don't worry about, are you supporting me? Are you helping me? I'm not worried about that, because I have to find that within myself. It's nice when it comes from the outside, but it's not necessary. And I am like an actor who is awakened to the fact that I'm on a stage. I'm in a movie, and it's temporary, it's transient. And so now I'm almost like a free actor. I can almost sort of like, what's the word they use for that? An actor who just sort of makes stuff up. Improv. Now I can be more improviso. I always think of, we were watching a commentary on The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, and they said about how one of the great things about Jack Nicholson is that he was really good at that. And in fact, when he would just follow the script and just sort of play it as it was there, even Kubrick would say, no, do it again. And as he would get more improviso, it would get better. And they'd say, yeah, let's take that. So that's how I think, we're all to be like sort of like Jack Nicholson. We're crazy. We'll improvise it. But we know the story. We know what's going on. Here's another reading. Knowing that everything in this realm of the ego self is finite, we experience being thrown into the illusion that we are separated from our primordial source. And this perception causes a kind of a hell room. Thus, it is still necessary, in spite of everything, to act nobly in the face of suffering, become keepers of eternity. And that's a passage from the Sutra of the One Body of the Buddha. And for me, the interpretation of that makes the most sense is that it does take, it's sort of related to the original when I talked about making an island of yourself, is you have to choose. There's like an existential choice. And it's one you have to make every day. It's not like one you make here and then you're good. You know? It's one you make every day, right? It's like in the 12 steps, right? It's something that you have to do every day. And I think that's important too, because sometimes life can be so hard, brutal. And it's so easy when we're experiencing that to sort of give in, give up. But what we're being called to do is to not choose to give in to it. And I don't even think that requires any kind of feeling associated with it. I think it's just simply the act of, no, I'm not doing that. And yes, this is what I'm doing. So it's a choice, always a choice. The next reading says, finding ourselves existentially here, we must be still and create a transcendental inner access of going against the stream of the world of delusion, hamartia, and evil action. It is necessary to change the direction of our inner compass, or we will be provoked through emotional distraction from the contemplation of what is most holy, oneness. It's interesting, the stream of this world, and so that I threw the Greek word in there because I thought that illustrated it. Have anyone heard the word hamartia in Greek? It was original. Have you heard of it before? It's used in Greek tragedies, right? And then it was also used by St. Paul to talk about the concept of sin. And so what does it mean? It means two things. It means, one, that you are aiming at a target and you miss, right? In its simplest sense. But it also means that the aiming itself is somewhat flawed. And so it's not just a matter of missing it, it's the intention itself, which is flawed. And so I think of this passage as referring to this living out of oneness as the part where we realize that there is a world that we're involved in that has a lot of hamartia, it has a lot of delusion, and there's a lot of evil actions. Now in Buddhism, we don't believe anyone is inherently evil. And we don't give evil some kind of theological construct of duality, but there's still harmful intention. And there's a lot of it. And so part of our realization in our practice is that it's out there. And that practicing as a Buddhist, or practicing, drop the labels, someone who's practicing oneness, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be people that want to take you off the path. Now, they don't do that, I believe, because they're awake. They do it because they're deluded, but that's real. So it's not that, once you're awake, everybody's friendly, la, la, la. No, there are people like trying to tear you down. They don't want to see you like that, right? That pains them. And so they will come at you. And so you must practice defense of the dark arts. You must learn how to protect yourself. And that's one of the things that we teach. One of the things that we do. Last reading. In order to realize this oneness, we still need to make the sometimes long and often difficult ascent of the holy Silver Mountain. That's the one Ronnie was referring to. Silver is a symbol related to the moon and the cycles of psychic projection, and it represents emotional healing, fluid, sensitive, and mysterious. It is soothing, calming, and purifying. From a mindful point of view, it signals a time of reflection and a change of direction. A time of reflection and a change of direction, as it illuminates the way forward, which opens us to a vision from above the human horizon, to see the morning star, and let the fire of its light come down and ignite and burn brightly within us, illuminating the way from self-consciousness to universal consciousness. To hear the voice of the Buddha quietly respond to the painful cries of our ego self and remind us of our true nature. To cry out, "Come and make me holy again." We are reminded of our temporary delusional diaspora from the true country, Nirvana. And this opens us to a direct contemplation of divine abiding. This rending of the veil of delusion is then the rapture of the Dharma. There's a lot there. But the thing that I like about that is it's again, this idea that from the ego self's perspective, it's a mountain that we're ascending, the Silver Mountain. And again, we don't do it alone, but we have to find it within ourselves. We can't depend on others. We have to just find it within ourselves. But there are others out there to help us. And as we do this, there's the ego self's part sees progress and regress. You know, someone will come to me and say, "Hey, I've been practicing for 20 years and something hooked me and I feel like I was just right back to where I was at the beginning." Well, that's the nature of the ego self. But I also believe, again, it comes from us to say, "Make me holy again." Every time that I feel that I'm falling off the path, that's the cry to my true self that I make. Because if I try to do it purely out of the ego self, it won't work. And in fact, the more I try to do it out of my ego self, usually the worse it gets. And so there is a giving of myself to that graciousness of that oneness that is always there. And that allows my ego self to be transmogrified as an expression of oneness in this life. And that's what we think of Shakyamuni. We think of his life as a symbolic representation of that which is for each of us. And finally, I'll say that the main practice that I think really helps you to live out of oneness or enlightenment or know that intimacy daily, and that's the practice of liturgy. Now, liturgy is a word that we mostly associate with, in Western traditions, with the worship of a deity. But liturgy really, it comes from the word liturgos, and it means the work, and the work of us together. And so for me, that's the practice that grounds me. That's the practice that I find is most important. I said that the liturgy always involves refuge, repentance, and renewal. Now that word repentance, that stings people, but really we call it the accord. But repentance just means, you know what, I don't know what the heck I'm doing here. It's like the first step. I realized I'm not managing my life very well. Things are not going that way. And that's what it means. It really means to change your mind. The Greek word for repentance is metanoia, which means to change your mind. Or you realize you're going the wrong way. You're like, whoops, this isn't right. And you go the other way. That's all it is. But we take deep refuge in our true self. We take deep refuge in these practices. And the beauty of liturgy, and I would encourage you greatly to, it doesn't take that long to do. Like in our book of common meditation, liturgy of the day might take you 20 minutes, half hour. And it involves sitting quietly as well. But that's the one thing that I've found more than anything that keeps me living out it. Because I get pushed way off course sometimes too. The winds of delusion, hatred and greed can pummel my boat too. But that's what anchors me. That's what grounds me. I remember when my beloved sister was dying. She was in a car accident and she was in a coma for a week. And I remember the only thing that allowed me to be there for her family, my parents, my brother and sister, for her children. And they looked to me for that. The thing that grounded me was this. Because I was in such pain, in such grief, that I couldn't think about anything. And I couldn't do anything else. But this I did. And this allowed me to carry that out into my day so that when I went to the hospital, that I put my cushion on, I had a rolled up towel or blanket, and I sat it in her room, and I would sit there and I would match my breathing to the respirator so I could be one with her. And when others were in the room, I would go out into the hallway, and this window looked out over the guts of the building, the machine, the mechanism, and all the noises of it, the furnace. And I would sit there, and I would match my breathing with the hum of the furnace, and become one with it. That's what allowed me to be strong, be clear. So, that's it. So that's how you live out of oneness. Realize that oneness is all around you. It's you. You are oneness. There's nowhere you have to go to find it. It's you. And it's in the smallest things. And it's in the big things. I love my friend Neil Tyson was just in Hershey and did his show. I love the big things. I love the James Webb telescope and what it shows me. I can lose myself in those stars. I love at night to put the NASA feed on and go to sleep to them. It's just the earth. I can lose myself in that. But I also find it in the tiniest little things. A lot of times when I go into somebody's home for the first time, I don't look at all the stuff that's inside. I look in the corners. What's in the corner? What's in this bedroom? And I realize that this is my practice. That it's nice when people can help me. It's nice when I get some guidance, and certainly that's what Sangha is for, but I can't rely on it. I can't rely on it. Because if I do, I'm going to be disappointed. I'm going to be sorely disappointed. And so I have to drop that expectation. And then I have to make the choice to live nobly in the face of the suffering. And realize that I can wake up, that I'm an actor in a story, in a drama, but I don't have to live out of that script. And I certainly realize that this isn't the main reality. That I'm more like an avatar of my true self in this time and space. But it is a fun adventure. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, once said, can you imagine a game where you could enter into it and there would be an adventure, and there'd be life and death, and great challenges, and great sort of things going on, and it was very risky. Wouldn't that be exciting if you could play a game like that? And the only entrance fee was you had to forget that you were playing a game. So we're like that. And then realize that there are forces and principalities and powers, as they used to say, that will try to take you down. And so you must learn your defense against the dark. Finally, to realize that all of this, mindfulness and meditation, all of these wonderful, wonderful things, we can experience all of it here. That's what I think of as liturgy, like the things that we do. This is like experience of intimacy, experience of oneness. And that's what I would highly encourage you to do. And take 20 minutes. If you start entering into it and you really give yourself to it, you will love it. I love it. I love to spend that time in that way. Sometimes you got to drag me back into the world, because you got to unhook, and you got to establish yourself in the graciousness of oneness. And you got to unhook sometimes. And so there's nothing wrong with that. Cultivate. So I hope you find that helpful. I'm just going to sit for a moment.